Hello, listener. Welcome back to Historian Radio, where we trace the dust of the past to find the seeds of the future. Tonight, we begin a new story. Not one of gods in golden halls, nor of thunder and war, but of what remains after everything ends. When last we stood together, we watched fire devour the 9 realms. We heard the cry of the Horn, and we walked with gods as they fell, one by one in the field of fate. That was Ragnarok, but this is something else. This is the silence after the scream, the ash after the blaze, the breath after the last word. This is the beginning of a world not ruled by prophecy, but by possibility. So close your eyes. Let the past settle like dust, and come with me now, to where the first green leaf breaks through blackened earth, to where Baldr, god of light, returns, not in triumph, but in tenderness. This is the new roots, Baldr and the dawn after fire. Chapter 1. The first morning the fire had passed. Not all at once, like rain slipping from stone. It faded slowly, reluctantly, as if even flame had mourned what it had destroyed. The sky was ash-grey, soft with silence. The earth no longer screamed. It only waited. And then a footstep, bare careful, pressed into blackened soil. Baldr had returned, not from war, not from victory, but from the quiet halls of the dead, where he had waited through ages, his light held still like a flame cupped. In 2 hands he looked around and saw no walls, no cities, no gods, only ruin. But in that ruin he saw space, space for something new. He knelt and let his fingers touch the soil. It was warm, it remembered everything, but it was willing. And in that moment Baldr smiled, because near his hand, tiny and trembling, a green sprout pushed upward, a single leaf, born not from prophecy, but from possibility. He walked without a destination. There was no throne to return to, no hall to reclaim. Only the wind, only the echo of fire, fading at last. Behind him, the sky began to change, from grey to soft gold. Not sunlight, but light, gentle, quiet, new. Chapter 2. The silent companion. He felt the presence before he saw the shape. The air shifted, not with threat, but with memory. Baldr turned, slowly, his feet sinking into the soft ash. And there, standing at the edge of the quiet horizon, was the brother who had killed him, the brother who had been used. And yet his brother, no weapon, no armor, only silence, and the way his shoulders trembled beneath the weight of what had been. Did not speak. He had no words. Not because he was afraid, but because grief does not need language. Baldr took 1 step forward, then another, then stopped, close enough to reach out, but did not. And lowered his head, not in shame, not in defense, but in acceptance. Then Baldr smiled, a soft thing, barely more than breath, and he said, quietly, "We are still here." That was enough. They walked, side by side, through the remnants of the old world. No crown, no command, no judgment, only the sound of footsteps on new earth. Only the scent of dust giving way to green. They did not speak often, but they understood. Everything by dusk, they came to a hill. It was bare, save for a single tree, small, but alive. Its branches curled upward, as if reaching for names not yet written. The 2 brothers sat beneath it, not as gods, not as symbols, as witnesses, and in the quiet between them, something bloomed. Not forgiveness, not forgetfulness, just the truth that sometimes those who remain are the ones trusted to begin again. Chapter 3. The seed in the stone, the stars, had not yet returned. The sky was still soft and pale, as if the heavens were afraid to show much too soon. But Baldr and walked beneath it, not searching, only listening. The earth had quieted, But it was not empty. It hummed now, a low sound, like breath beneath sleep. And then they found it. Not a shrine, not a ruin, not even a tree, just a stone, dark, cracked down the center, sitting in the middle of nothing, but it pulsed, faintly, like a heart long forgotten, still beating. Baldr stepped forward first. He knelt beside it, rested one hand on its surface, and closed his eyes. What he felt wasn't power. It wasn't divinity. It was remembrance. The stone remembered Yggdrasil, not its grandeur, not its height, but its purpose: to connect, to hold, to nourish. Beneath that stone, something slept, not a god, not a weapon, a seed. Baldr did not dig. He did not command. He only whispered, "If you wish to rise again, we will wait." And from the crack in the stone, a thread of green emerged, thin, uncertain but alive. Hr knelt beside his brother, his fingers brushing the edge of the new root. He did not speak. He only bowed his head, not in reverence, but in partnership, because they were no longer heirs to thrones. They were caretakers of what comes after. Behind them, a breeze stirred. For the first time, it smelled of spring. Chapter 4. The children who remember nothing. The light had softened, not the harsh light of battle, nor the blinding light of old divine power, but a gentler glow, as if the sky itself were learning how to begin again. Baldr sat beside the stone where the green root curled upward, his hand resting on the soil, still warm from the sun's new touch. And from beyond the hill, he heard footsteps, not the clank of armor, not the tread of giants. Bare feet, small, slow. Careful, he looked up. Two figures approached, a boy and a girl. Young, but not children. They were thin, pale, wrapped in woven cloth, eyes wide, not with fear, but with wonder. They had not known war. They had not known gods. They had only known darkness and the quiet breaths of roots in the deep places beneath the world elf. Yggdrasil, their names had been whispered in prophecy, carried by trees, protected by bark and earth as the fire raged above. Now they stood under open sky, seeing its colors for the first time. Baldr rose to meet them. He did not tower. He did not shine. He only smiled. The boy looked at the sprout growing from the stone. He knelt beside it, curious, not asking what it was, only how to care for it. The girl looked at Hr. She reached out and took his hand, gently, like a question, not a greeting. And he, the one who had once destroyed the light, let her. They did not know the old stories. They had not heard the names, but they carried something deeper. Instinct. They knew how to wait. They knew how to grow. They knew how to begin. And that, Baldr realized, was enough. So the gods stepped back, and the children stepped forward, into a world not yet written, carrying only silence, seeds, and the gift of forgetting, not as loss, but as freedom. Chapter 5. The tree that has no name. Days passed, though no one counted them. There was no calendar, no sun chariot drawn across the sky, no seasons named by ancient gods, only light, only rest, only growth. The sprout rising from the cracked stone had grown taller now. Its stem thickened, its leaves spread wide, catching wind and water and wonder. But no one called it Yggdrasil, because this was not the same tree. It did not bind the 9 realms. It did not whisper fate into the ears of gods. It only grew, freely, wildly, unclaimed. Baldr did not speak to it. He knelt beside it, watered it when rain was slow to come, touched its bark, not as a master, but as a witness. Hr brought stones to circle the roots, marking sacred space not to protect, but to remind that this place mattered because it had no name, yet unleafy. With quiet hands and steady steps, wove grasses and flowers at the base. Not offerings, not worship, just beauty, because they could. Birds began to return, not summoned, not created. They came because the wind no longer smelled of fire. Small animals crept from hollows. Streams that had run black now shimmered with silver. And the sky, for the first time in an age, was blue. Not glorious, not divine, just open. No one asked what the tree was for. It was not for travel. It was not for power. It simply was. And perhaps, Baldr thought, that was the one lesson they had never learned before. That some things are not meant to carry worlds. Some things are just meant to be alive. Chapter 6. The Memory Beneath the Bark. Was Yggdrasil, who dreamed first. She told Baldr of it one morning, while dew still clung to the grass, and the new tree cast a shadow for the first time. I saw a hall, she said, but it wasn't gold. It was made of woven branches. There were no thrones, only stories carved into the walls. Baldr listened, his head tilted slightly. Not in judgment, but in memory. Halls had burned, crowns had crumbled, but dreams had survived everything. Later, HR sat with Elf by the stream. They did not speak often, but sometimes silence between people is its own kind of language. She handed him a smooth stone and asked, "Did you ever remember being a god?" He held the stone in his palm for a long while. "No," he said finally, "only being heavy." She nodded. That was enough. As the days lengthened, the children began carving things into bark, not to claim, but to remember. A line for rain, a swirl for wind, a mark for the day, a bird nested in the branches. Not history, not scripture, just moments, because now memory was not written by gods. It was kept by hands that had never known fire. Baldr watched them with something softer than pride, something quieter than awe. He knew that in time, his name would fade. He would become a story told near fire, a whisper in the wind, a name the trees remembered, but the mouths of children mispronounced. And that was right, because the world no longer needed gods to hold it together. It needed only those willing to care for it. One evening, as the stars returned fully for the first time, the tree swayed in the breeze, and from its bark a sound rose, not words, not prophecy, but a pulse, a rhythm, as if the tree had begun to breathe, as if the new world had found its heartbeat. Chapter 7. The Fire That Never Returns. The old world had burned hot, fueled by glory, rage, revenge, and prophecy. This one breathed slower. There were no more battles between gods, no more monsters hidden in caves. No one waited for a hero, because now everyone tended the world. Even the wind had grown gentler. Even the rain fell with thought. HR, who had once been blind, now saw not with eyes, but with presence. He moved through the forest barefoot, recognizing trails the trees had barely formed. He taught Elf how to feel weather before it arrived. Taught Yggdrasil to speak to the birds, not with voice, but stillness. Baldr became less a god and more a presence. Sometimes he would vanish for days, not lost, just wandering, tending small saplings, helping rivers reroute around stones. He left no mark, but when he returned, the grass always seemed greener and the air lighter. One night, around a quiet fire, LF asked, "Do you think that fire will ever come again?" Baldr didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, "If it does, it won't be from the gods. It'll be from forgetting." Yggdrasil frowned. "Forgetting what?" Baldr looked into the flames, then smiled. "That we don't need to be powerful to keep the world alive, only present." And the fire, as if listening, flickered without smoke. The next morning, the tree bore its first fruit, round, golden, glowing, not magic, just enough, and no one rushed to pick it. They simply sat beneath its shade and watched it shine, because this, finally, was a world that knew how to wait. Chapter 8. The end that never ends. The seasons turned softly. not forced by wheels in the sky or gods pulling the sun. They came like breath, spring into summer, summer into dusk. The old myths faded into mist. Names like Odin, Thor, and Loki were no longer feared or praised, only wondered about. Children asked if they had ever truly lived. The elders smiled and told them, if they didn't, someone still needed them to. And that was enough. The tree that had no name grew tall, not to hold worlds, but to shelter voices. People sat beneath it, not to pray, but to speak to each other. And in the bark, in quiet lines and gentle curves, the story of the world was carved, not as a timeline, but as a song, one without ending, one that simply continued like footsteps through grass, like leaves falling in rhythm, like a name whispered from one generation to the next, not because it had to be remembered, but because it had once brought light. And so the world turned, not perfect but patient, and under a sky that no longer feared fire, light became something simple, the warmth between two hands, the shade of a tree grown without command, the sound of laughter not held back, and that was all it ever needed to be.